peace, 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 peace. We back, live and direct. We got to get hype in here. I get hype when I talk about this wisdom. All right. So where we stopped at, we right here. I'm gonna just reverse a little bit and go back to the book American BC. And there is an alabaster egg of a cartouche of King Tut found in Idaho. Africans and Native Americans by Dr. Jack Forbes states, the slave trade started in America and the slaves were taken mostly to Spain and Europe. When the Spanish came to America, they found the Indios or the Indians, black people who are with God. All of the evidence proves that blacks are the oldest natives in America, hands down. As I say again, Morris, let's reverse this. In the book, America BC, there is an alabaster egg of a cartouche of King Tut found in Idaho. Africans and Native Americans by Dr. Jack Forbes states, and I quote, the slave trade started in America and the slaves were taken mostly to Spain and Europe. When the Spanish came to America, they found Indios, Indians, the black people who are with God. And all this proved that the blacks, per se, are the oldest native in America, hands down, Moors. So you have to ask, why is this information suppressed? Well, and we have to go with the wisdom because it's there. The reason why it's suppressed is Europeans, and it's just the history, you can research this, want us all to believe that blacks or indigenous people all came from Africa to keep the land that they have taken, not to feel guilty about certain things. And it's just what it is, Moors. But the Amra Washita the Hangdi Moors lay claim to the following lands. And through the bloodline, you can research it. The De Bourbon estate, also known as the Emperor International estate of the Bourbon Habsburg Empire, which includes Western Europe, Moors, the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, Switzerland, Germany, etc. So it's so much that the history is there. Other things in history that we might not known of is that, let's see. Let's see, as well as, okay, in North America and the Caribbean, I was just trying to fast forward because I'm putting my dissertation together. I don't want to read it all though. But in North America and the Caribbean, in addition to Central and South America Moors, and all of North America, west of the Imperial Demarcation Line in 1713, or the British Royal Proclamation Line in 1763. So given the secret treaty of San Defenso or Defonso of 1800, the De Bourbon, Charles, the King of Spain, succeed the French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte, the seaport city of New Orleans, only not the whole of Louisiana. So what Napoleon ceded to the U.S. President Thomas Jefferson was that port of New Orleans, not the whole of Louisiana, as claimed by the U.S. in the so-called Louisiana Purchase Treaty of 1803. This fact has been secured in a secret treaty of San Defenso of October the 1st, 1800. You can see the secret treaty of the unlawfulness of the Louisiana Purchase. It's there, Morris. U.S. President Thomas Jefferson sent Robert Livingston to purchase the Louisiana Purchase from Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon only had the power to sell the harbor city of New Orleans to the United States, according to the secret treaty. But Napoleon violated international law by selling the city without consent from Spain. Research the science, making the deal null and void. So the Washita received no money from the Louisiana Purchase, and the purchase exceeded its boundaries by covering over 15 states and parts of Canada, which were never part of the deal, Morris. Research this history. You don't have to believe nothing I say. The United States took land without giving the Washita due process and equal protection of the law, which should have come in the form of hearing and compensation for their land. That's why, and I think it was 1990, They compensated them land. They gave them land back. Research the history. This never transpired. Therefore, the land was unlawfully taken from the Washita by the government. Just like everything else. You can research it. So, as a result of the evidence, according to Article 6 of the United States Constitution, treaties are the supreme law of the land, and the 14th and 5th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process. Due process. Due process. Let's read that clearly, because in the court of law, there is no excuse of not knowing the law. So you have to understand all words. Let's listen to this again. No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or due property without due process. Come on. Understand what I'm trying to say? And equal protection of the laws. The United States is constantly occupying Florida and the 15 current U.S. states and 2 Canadian provinces, better known as the Louisiana Purchase. You can research the science. You don't have to listen to nothing I say. So according to the due process of the law and equal protection of the law, if the government can't give the Washita their land back, oh, I say that one more time more. I said it's a document in the National Archives in Washington, D.C. and other places in other history. There's documents in the National Archives in Washington, D.C. that confirm the presence right here in North America lands thousands of years before the arrival of the first Europeans and their advanced civilization, independence, them as the ancient ones. Geographical mound building, the Dagomandi, the Moor prior could never do these stole away their possession of their control of the ancient lands. Partially identified in the records as one in parentheses 1848 U.S. Supreme Court ruling in the case of the U.S. government versus the hearers of Henry Turner Tunicate. The Tamor High Court found that the neutral strip 2,961,983.5 acres of land was definitely not a part of the territory ceded to the United States. Louisiana Department of Transportation, 1940. The 1992 return of 68,883 acres of land by the state of Louisiana, land grant, doc number 923-1991, designated Washita proper, and 3 Washita Terra, including the Floridas. But that's nothing compared to what was stolen. So it's attached to United States Supreme Court cases in which the Washita won the cases. And it's a supremejustice.com. I have the cases. You can research them. The United States High Commission for Human Rights recognized the self-declarations of the indigenous people and acknowledged the Anaxaton, the UAXASHAKTUN Empire, or the Washita, as the oldest indigenous people on earth, Moors, and assigned UN grant application, doc number 215 in 1993, to the Washita Moors. The United States has recognized Amura Washita D. Dugdahamudia as the indigenous people of North America and had under consideration in the 105th Congress, doc number HR number 260, the Guadalupe Hidalgo Treaty Lands Claim Act of January 1997, Moors. Congressional bills, act cases, authority from the hearers of the Henry Turner D. You say if they can't give them their land. Oh, I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, well, in a court case, when they went to for 1 million parts of land, but a lot of the Washita Moors like 63,000 acres back of the 2 million acres that was taken. You know, and they gave the land back in the court case. And you can research that. Let's see where I said. Okay. I'll go back a little bit. Blah, 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 blah. The case of the U.S. government versus the heirs of Henry Turner, Tunica, in which the high courts found that the neutral strip, 2,961,983.5 acres of land, was definitely not a part of the territory ceded of the United States of the Louisiana Department of Transportation. This was 1940. In 1992, return of 68,883 acres of land by the state of Louisiana, land grant 923-19 Washita proper was given back, which was nothing, you know, America. And in the 105th Congress, doc number HR, the Guadalupe Hilo congressional bills, acts, and U.S. Supreme Court cases reaffirmed national sovereignty for the heirs of Henry Turner. In 1848, case number 1, United States versus Henry Turner's heirs, and the claim has been recorded before the World Court at the Hague, the HA, excuse me, the HA. The people themselves as the as the protectorate of lands known as the Floridas on the behalf of the Amore Washita de Humdii. And according to the declarations of indigenous rights, indigenous people are those who embody historical continuity with society which existed prior to the conquest, the discovery that I was telling you about, of the with that Christendom and that Catholic, which is, as well as a people brought into involuntary to the New World. And according to a United Nations treaty, all Black people are indigenous, Black persons or natural persons. Are human beings and sovereigns as they rightfully own the land. This is coming from Black Law's Dictionary. I'm just giving you things that is there. All Blacks are first-class citizens and don't even know it because we have accepted history and slave labels like Negro, Black, color, and not understanding history. What makes that both but the Washita tribal Moors are listed people number 93. I will say it again. The Washita tribal Moors are listed at the United Nations under the Indigenous People Organization number 21593. I repeat. I said the Washita tribal Moors are listed at the United Nations under the Indigenous People Organization number 21593. This became effective in 1993 Moors. The seat number for the Washita at the United Nations is 215. National law, the Washita has established itself independent nation, United Nations, doc number NIS 21, Corporate Union 1, and the Corporate United States of 1787. The land claim of the Washita has been affirmed by the Spanish and French, as well as British, pursuant to Spanish land grant of 1762 and 1795. According to federal law, the land of Washita has been defined as Indian country, and the people regarded as Indians per se, but indigenous, we got to know that. You're not a misnomer. but they have been placed under the authority of the United States government via the Bureau. You know what that is. So, as we wrap up, I'm just going to give you a little bit about the 103 amazing facts about the Black Indian of the Western Hemisphere. And you can research all this, Morris. When I say we have to understand real history and get out of spookism. So I'm just going to give you a little summary at the beginning, then we're going to jump to it. At times, statements or phrases can cause the human mind to tap into worlds or realities where a bigger picture or image of that time zone or reality is given, revealing more information about the reality. Someone else has been responsible for recording the history of our people of the past 500 years, other than my own people or of the own people. The perfection of our past is very limited. Our past and how we perceive our past has been shown to us by a people who have so far not recorded our history correctly for the past 500 years. So may these facts penetrate the psyche of mind of all people and cause a mental stimulus that ignites the spirit and breaks the spell of amnesia and currently plague all of us. We are desperate in need of a total memory recall, Morris. So we got to talk about some real things. And I'm going to jump right into it. How we lost to the lack of knowledge because we refuse to learn. That's right there, I call a self-inflicted wound. We should be studying and doing research. I tell people in academia, that is the thing called the reading list. That's program learning. So the so-called Black Indians have lived in the Western Hemisphere since time immemorial. The so-called Black Indians were not spawned or created as a result of Africans coming from the Western Hemisphere during the transatlantic slave. During the transatlantic slave trade, mixing in the native people of the Western Hemisphere, also known as Native American Indians. Research the history. Native or indigenous people of Western Hemisphere, also known as Indians, did not refer to themselves or their ancestors as Indian. And now I'm using the word Indian since most people are accustomed to the title. We teach it more. This is what we're doing. So we have to use the right verbiage or the right context when we're using words. So the word Indian, red man, and Native American are European colonized terms, Moors. Native or indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere refer to themselves by ways of tones. We refer to ourselves by ways of tones, vibrations of expression. So our spirit said who and what we were, and the name given to you was based upon what type of spirit you possessed. All native or indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, aka Indians, possess different philosophical features: hair texture, bone structure, and skin tone. All native or indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, Indians per se, did not and do not have high cheekbones, slanted eyes, all that reddish stuff. Now we're coming from the history of the Black Indian of the. It is difficult for society to accept the Black Indian per se as being native or indigenous to the Western Hemisphere region because society has been brainwashed with fabricated fake images of indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere Moors. So you got to understand, like I was telling you about the doctrine of discovery, when I'm telling you about things that really happened in history, that most reservations were carefully selected by the U.S. government to occupy reservations when reservations were being established. That the U.S. government, for the most part, selected European or pale-skinned Indians or Hollywood versions to occupy these reservations. I mean, it's just what it is. The dark-skinned native, indigenous to Western Hemisphere, aka Indians, were reclassified during the 17 and 1800s as Negroes and coloreds. Certain dark-skinned natives were allowed to settle on reservations with pale skins, and most were not. So you got to know the science. Most dark-skinned native indigenous to the Western Hemisphere who were reclassified as Negroes or colored during the 17 and 1800s have found themselves in the 20th century as Black Americans and African Americans. Some dark-skinned natives, indigenous to the Western Hemisphere, Indians per se, were given an ultimatum: go to Oklahoma and be an Indian on the reservation, or stay where you are at and reclassify as a Negro or colored person. I'm telling you, it's all about reclassification. Everywhere you went, you were took from the land. When you talk about the Jamaican Maroons and all over, they were reclassified, took from the land. So this is history. Dark-skinned native indigenous to the Western Hemisphere who were during the colonial era, either by choice or by force, have found themselves engulfed or assimilated into Spanish culture and the Spanish language. Why? We talk about what? Morse Latin. Now most of them have lost their knowledge of themselves and their true identity. Be classified as Latino or Hispanic. Down to misnomers. Here we go again. All native people or indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, aka Indians, dialects of language, synonymous to the Bantu language. When we talk about the Africans and agent, a synchronicity, Morris. Most early European writers during the 1400s, 1800s, including pale-skinned Jews. I'm not coming from no biased perspective. All of the savage, Indians, research the doctrine of discovery, they called it, throughout the Americas, were without a doubt a pale-skinned European by the name of James Adair. I'm going to show you her book. When he talked about the Indian are the Israelites, you must do the science. But in James Adair book, History, he wrote 23 arguments to support his findings. American Indians were in fact descendants of the lost tribe of Israel. I mean, it's just what it is, Morris. That's why when you research the Egyptian president, I forget his name, he said the reason why Jerusalem is cursed because the chosen people, they left black and came back white. That was his saying. That's why they didn't want to give you Jerusalem, because if they give you Jerusalem, they have to give you Africa, because everything was, by each other. But anyway, Nat Turner, Paul Cuff, Crispus Attucks, Martin Luther King, Harriet Tubman, all of Elijah Pope, Elijah Muhammad, amongst million others, were indigenous to the Western Hemisphere. Indigenous. It's just what it is. The title, Black American and African American, are fake, inappropriate, European colonized titles to keep indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, aka Indians, under a spell of ignorance. What's a spell? Words are spells. The titles, Black American and African American, were purposely created to psychologically and spiritually disconnect indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere from our true motherland, which is right up under our feet. We are here in America, Al Morocco. Jesse Jackson, yeah, he was a South Carolina Cherokee, started to promote the fake title of African America that has been imposed upon Black Indians or the indigenous to the Western Hemisphere region. It has become quite profitable to brainwash indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere into thinking that Africa is our native land. But you got to understand what I'm talking about. We're talking about one continent. So you got to understand what I'm talking about more than the context of what I'm saying. Yes, everybody is from the continent of Africa per se. You got to understand where I'm going. There is a campaign currently underway by the U.S. government and the U.S. government-sponsored natives that preaches a doctrine that says that Black Indians of the Western Hemisphere is a result of African mixture and has not always dwelled in the Western Hemisphere. Bullcrap. Most so-called Black Americans or so-called African Americans, when asked if they have Native Americans in their family, at least 95 respond with the answer yes. In addition, this is so-called Black Americans or so-called African Americans. So we have to understand the psyche, the thing that plays on your mental brain, right? Most blacks or African Americans that call themselves, they hate to accept the fact that you're native of the land. You know that. Indigenous to the Western Hemisphere because of programmed, fabricated images of native people to the Western Hemisphere Moors. Fake images of our own indigenous ancestors have been routinely drilled into our psyche since birth. Since birth. That's why when I go to all the museums and I show you literature and monuments, I say, look, Moors, this is the stuff that's there. This is pseudo-academia. They tell you. Pseudo-academia, pseudo-science. The doctrine of discovery. Catholic and Christianity is the same. The Black Indian images does not register with the psyche because of the fake imagery. Programming of the U.S. government has instilled into the minds of how native indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere look. Even the schools, when I tell you about the reading list and why they don't teach you about Mark Twain, about when he wrote about King Leopold in the Congo, cutting all the indigenous hands off for rubber. He wrote about these things. A lot of things were done by force. If you would be killed or you would do things. So we have to put things in a proper context, Moors. Native or indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, aka Indians, built pyramids and pyramid mounds, just like the ancient Egyptians. When I say right here in the Grand Canyons, you find all Egyptian artifacts. This synonymous, a comparison of both cultures for opposite sides of the world is because they both were genetically linked. Synchronicity. Because they're the same people. Remember more, how about everything I keep talking about, all the true stuff I just got done giving you the history of the Washita Moors and about connecting the dot and the Pangea. So, and I'm going back again, during the time of Pangea, which is a Greek word that means all one. All of the continents of the planet Earth were one mass of land, Moors. People lived and thrived during the time of Pangea. This is a large explanation as to why the pyramid builders in Eastern Hemisphere and pyramid builders in the Western Hemisphere. All the stuff is here in the States. That's why I say it was all in one area. You have Europe and the continent of Mexico, the continent of Africa. Why you think it's other reason why Europeans was coming to the continent of Africa or Mexico? Because that they were dying at the age of 20. You arguing with somebody because they say they the Neanderthal living in caves with dinosaurs. Let that person have that. You don't understand what genetics is. Research it. They tell you what it is. Research what hybrid is. They tell you it ain't you. But all these cultures have the things that are incredibly synonymous or the same. The continents continue to move. Some move 4 inches a year. The continent will one day become one mass of land again, Moors. The continents are currently separated at this time, Moors. But however, what's above and below? We must understand this. The genetic links of being from Pangea is never apart, Moors. Now let's get to some science. This in the history books. The term Moor was applied to dark-skinned, brown-skinned, and reddish-brown-skinned people who were not only indigenous to Europe, but to West and North Africa. When you look up white and they say that Northwest South Africa, you don't understand the science. Even Black Indians of Western Hemisphere were also dubbed with the title Indigenous Black Celtics. When I show you the Celtic magic, I don't even know what that book is. And I show Moors, I say, you're getting caught up in skin tone. That's all your science. Indigenous Black Britons, Indigenous Black Portuguese, and Indigenous Black Spaniards, also known as the Moors, had a long time knowledge of indigenous people in the Western Hemisphere. These Moors were also informed. Hold on, I'm sorry. Because my brother like, wow, I know I'm gonna highlight for it because I'm gonna go back to teach my kids that next week. Okay, these Moors were also informed of the different customs, tradition, and languages of the natives of the Western Hemisphere. These dark-skinned Europeans, Moors, these dark-skinned Europeans, Moors, were used as buffers by pale-skinned Europeans to help colonize the New World. These indigenous Black Europeans, aka Moors, not only solicited the New World to pale-skinned Europeans, but also waged war on indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, aka the Indians. You got to understand science, man, and understand people have a choice. Well, 103 amazing facts about the Western Hemisphere. 103 amazing facts about the Black Indian of the Western Hemisphere. You see what I'm saying? So when we be talking about people killing each other and getting things confused with the feds is and saying, oh, this killed these and Moors killed these and this and that. My brother was killed by a Negro. My homeboy was killed by his brother. So we put things in proper perspective. If you living back then and someone's capturing you and you put this uniform, if you down or not, we kill you. That's the choice that you make. So certain Black indigenous Europeans, aka Moors, that went under such titles as clergymen, European nobility, shared a common consciousness with pale-skinned Europeans. That common consciousness being that the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, aka indigenous Moors, were untainted, heathen savages. So we talk about different parts of the world, Moors. You have to understand things. That's why Noble Drew Ali said, you have to be careful because some of your own people will put you back in slavery. You got to understand science of what this brothers was saying. When I say I don't get caught up in skin tone, you got to understand the science, man. Both dark-skinned and pale-skinned Europeans who were either Celtic, Briton, Galaic, or what have you, who were fleeing religious persecution in Egypt, in Europe, and were struggling to perceive ancient traditional customs, pagan ways, upon arrival in the New World, ran the bosom of Black indigenous nations to the Western Hemisphere soil. Certain Moors helped to navigate Christopher Columbus. It's just history. You got to know this science, man. When I say it's a type of everything, it's a type of everything. It's a type of everything. All Negro Black colors ain't right. We got people in our family. So when we start doing history and science, we all these Moors did this. I say, man, you got to be crazy. Everybody is not righteous. Come on, man. We're talking about history of who you are, that you're not Negro, Black, and colored. You're getting into you're fighting the wrong fight. So that's not the fight. But yes, Moors helped navigate Christopher Columbus. You think he was brilliant enough to get around to these areas? No. He wasn't lost. He knew exactly where he was going, simply because who was on the boat with him? Facts, Moors. Facts may be stubborn, but it's just what it is. The U.S. constitutional government is a plagiarized copy of a Black Indian governmental system, the Iroquois Nation. When I say you got to study history, man, and real law, the founding fathers didn't find anything. They went to Black Indians, the Iroquois Nation, seeking assistance to break away from their chief back in England, King George III. Research it. The Iroquois Nation taught them their system of government, and the only part the so-called founding fathers left out was the matriarchy, or the matriarchy. The Black Indian woman ruled the Iroquois Nation, Moors. When I say the woman is Mayat, the garden that produced food and life, most Black Indians of the Western Hemisphere found themselves succeeded by European lifestyle, custom, and traditions. When the American Revolutionary War broke out, Black Indians found themselves fighting against their own kinsmen. Some Black Indian nations sided with British, while other Black Indian nations sided with the colonial rebels, aka Americans. Research history. After the Black Indian nations helped to set up the colonial government, America, and in addition to help to sponsor military support for their new colonial government, Black Indian nations continued to fight and war against themselves, as they did before and after Europeans set foot upon the Western Hemisphere or on the Western Hemisphere shores, always infighting, which happens today. Black Indians were not conquered by Europeans. And I repeat, Black Indians were not conquered by Europeans or the so-called white man. A rich history or intertribal warfare amongst each other that continued before and after European arrival, Moors. The intertribal warfare that existed among Black Indians in the Western Hemisphere was so great, Moors, that it left them in a state of impotency. With impotency, Moors, setting in after years and years of clan warfare, Moors, in addition to the attraction of European trickedness, customs, and traditions, and the worshiping of God named Jesus, all assisted in paving the way of European occupancy of Black Indian lands, their spirits, and their minds. That's why once you capture the mind, you've captured everything. That's the analogy of cutting the head off the snake, and then you have the body. Same analogy. After the colonial government was established, America per se, Black Indian nations continued to aid the new colonial government with military assistance that other Black Indian nations that fought against European expansions and the taking of their ancestral lands. You see that science? General Mad Anthony Wayne, aka the Black Snake, was a Black Indian who served under research it. The army of General Anthony Wade consisted of mostly Black Indians in the ranks and did the entire colonial government army. Besides Black Indians making up the bulk of the new colonial government army in America, Moors also filled up the ranks. Research it. George Washington established treaties or contracts with various Black Indian nations, as well as with the Moors, for military support against other Black Indian nations who did not support the occupancy of the new colonial government, America. After the colonial government, America confiscated most Black Indian lands. They, the colonial government, refused to pay Black Indian warriors pensions for their military support. But I can go on and on and on, Morris. There's 103 amazing facts about the Black Indian in the Western Hemisphere. Let me see. Let me skip along. Let me give you a little bit more. Let's see. Okay. Let me see. Nickajack, also known as Nigger Jack, was a Black Chachumanga or Chachumanga, a Black Indian. The ancestor led raids against the colonial rebels, the army, the Americans during the colonial rebel uprising or the American Revolutionary War. He fought alongside of the British Tories. His hideout was a cave in the vicinity of what is now known as the Chattanooga, Tennessee. In the state of Georgia, in the region known as Cobb County, there is a park, a road, and a creek named after this great warrior, Moors. There were thousands upon thousands of Black Indians who fought in the American Civil War and in wars before and after the war, who were Black Indians or native to the Western Hemisphere region, but were obviously to this fact. They only thought themselves to be Negroes, Moors, their parents and their parents' parents, who had lost the knowledge of themselves, their tribal identity, their nationality, and all honestly, simply pass on to the next generation the colonized title of Negro, Black, colored to the children. And thus today, an unbroken chain of ignorance continues to survive, Moors. Most of the Buffalo Soldiers were Black Indians, dispatched by the U.S. Army to assist in the colonizing and confiscation of Black Indian lands west of the Mississippi River, Moors. Reservation natives who don't know the true history and who are also brainwashed by images feel that the Buffalo Soldiers, Moors, who are ill mistaken and ill classified as African Americans, held the pale face drive them off of their lands and into reservations, Moors. So that's a little science. I ain't gonna go all the way into it. Many Black Indians who fought in the American Civil War, either on the Confederate side or the Union side, were not acknowledged as being indigenous or native. They were acknowledged of being Negroes. Most of the Navajo code talkers who were used to assist the U.S. government in World War II were blue Black Indians. The photo and film footage of the Black Navajo who participated in this war were carved out of history. That's how I showed you about Prince Whipple and Oliver Cromwell. That was carved out of the Bunker Hill. I showed you all that book. I showed you in that book, and I showed you in 1776 how they're not even in that book. The term Negro in color was not only applied to Black Indians to psychologically and spiritually remove them from their lands. These colonized titles were also applied to Black Indians who were incorporated into the slave market. Black Indians did a slave race on each other before and after European arrivals. Research history. Black Indians owned other Black Indians as slaves. These slaves were also classified as Negroes. European writers took advantage of what I just said, the number 56. Fact, to say that Indians own slaves. Listen, fake European images of so-called Indians were promoted, showing so-called Indians owning slaves. Also, our paintings were displayed showing distorted images of natives in the Western Hemisphere, owning owning dark-skinned people as slaves, who in most cases were also natives. The fake images of indigenous people in the Western Hemisphere, which usually displays them as having pale skin, shows them owning slaves whose skin is always depicted as being dark. Pale-skinned Europeans helped to create a consciousness which subliminally says that slaves and Negroes are synonymous. When most people hear or read about a slave, simultaneously, their image of a dark-skinned person appears in their mind by showing fake pale-skinned natives. Owning dark-skinned people helped to create the illusion that the so-called Indians and Negroes are two separate races, when in essence, they are the same people. Moors, let me show you something. Research The Forgotten Cause of the Civil War, A New Look at Slavery issue by Lawrence R. Tinzer. These books, they cost a lot, but I have them, and it reveals the history. The Forgotten Cause of the Civil War. I'm telling you, and you will see. And you will see, Moors. You can see for yourself. Let me see. Only dark-skinned people, pale-skinned Europeans. Pale-skinned Europeans help to create a consciousness with simultaneity. I gave you that. Okay. When most people hear or read about a slave, simultaneously the image of dark skin. Okay, I gave you all that. The U.S. government and the U.S. Government-sponsored natives are preaching a doctrine that says that the so-called black people became Indian or native people as a result of acquiring citizenship with different indigenous nations here on the Western soils. As to say that no dark-skinned people lived in the Western Hemisphere until the transatlantic African slave trade. You see that? Bullcrap. This tactic is exercised in attempts to discredit indigenous black, per se, Indians from claiming their true homeland, and subliminally supports the ridiculous notion that every dark-skinned person that is interpreted as black is from Africa. I can go on and on, Morris, but we're going to stop right there. I'm just going to that's a little bit of it. 103 AD question about the black Indian of the Western Hemisphere. I'll give you a little bit more. Let me see. It's so much, man. It's so much. I mean, it's just so much. Some people teach that the Olmec migrated from the Nile Valley region in East Africa to the Western Hemisphere. So if this is true, they were only received by black natives who were already residing there. See, we're talking about certain things. Many black Indians who became indoctrinated into European lifestyles, joining European orchestrated fraternities and secret societies, such as the Order of the European Freemasons. I mean, it's just so much stuff, man. When you got to understand, when I say it's a type of everything, everybody is not right. Like when Noble Drew Ali said, even your own kind of send you back to slavery. Black, Asians from various dynasties, the Chow, the Shang, and many other migrated from Asia thousands of years ago to the regions known in the black natives who were already occupying these lands. This explains why some natives or indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, aka Indians, have high cheekbones and slanted eyes. This type of image of the native of Western Hemisphere has been widely promoted. I can go on and on, Morris. I can go on and on. Some sold out, some kept it real. But we must know the history. But I love you all, Moors. Love, truth, peace, freedom, justice, health, and wealth. But if you don't have my books, Moors, please, I know I keep promoting my books. Let me show it one more time before we leave. Because there's wisdom in it. If you can't afford my book, they're $33. It's a donation. It's all tax exempt. It comes with a living, Moors. Healthy eating and living, where we do show you good smoothies, show you how to work out, show you how to clean parasites, show you what herbs to blend. You know what I mean? We made a coloring book for our kids, I Am Royalty coloring book. I did a lecture at an elementary school, so I created some pictures of royalty for our children color, so we don't always have to look at other things. Interpretation of, so we can get things the right way, man, so we won't be getting things misconstrued. It's one temple, one science, and we all should be talking the same thing. Interpretation of the divine creed of Moorish Islam. If not, a person only operates 720, and 720 is only your material manifestation. You must operate 720, material and spiritual, coming together as one, the circle in a circle. This is interpretation of the divine creed of Moorish Islam. We have Sufism and the triple road of the adapt chamber, featuring the committed and adapt manual and the use of our carpenter tools. Moors, I hope you read your Circle 7 Quran. Also, when I tell Moors, yep, or you can get a PDF. When I tell Moors, hold on. Sufism and the triple road of the adapt chamber, featuring the committed and adapt manual and the use of the carpenter tools. I mean, Moorish science is ancient committed in science. It's all in our Quran. These are the two that remind me of the ones we have in the workshop of the mind, where the things are made of the thought and where we build up our character. We're talking about ourselves, Morris. Black scholars, you got to under context what I'm saying, who debunk Euro-centric propaganda. We got to teach our science, man. We can't let things just go down without teaching the true history of where things come from and show all the scholarship, Anna Diop, Amos Wilson, all these brothers that came up with science. Amos Crest Wilson. Delectable vegan treats. We made a book for vegans to make nice vegan snacks. I mean, we should be creating our own. We don't have to support none of that outside ourselves. Moorish American Light of Ali and the Moorish Adapt Study Guide, the House of Ali, Mysticism, the Egyptian Adapt Prophet and Angel. This is the manual that brother should be supporting and sharing with all Moors so we can be on the right path. And then the other part is the civic side. 14 Asiatic scientists in history. We teach, man. This is a holy and divine movement. The essence of chemical element of Moorish archival. Come on, Moors. We create the science. And you are with feel. So with that being said, Moors, like I say, I love you all, man. I'm just a teacher. And I want brothers and sisters to do the things the right way. Ask questions. Ask questions. A teacher should teach. And he should never be upset with questions. If a brother or a sister say they are more some master teacher or some sheik, and they telling you to follow some camp or nationalize through some other publication, I hope you ask all the questions. I hope you understand where everything is going, because it's only one temple. It's only one temple. You know what I'm saying? It's only one temple, and that's the Moorish Science Temple of America. Yes, those are my books. They're all on my page. I sell them all. We're actually for donations. But I also print ancient books. You know, we have literature, so we can keep things going. So in time, when you think things might be out of publication, we'll have them. And like I said, I've gathered and compiled our own literature. So when people have questions of Moorish science or Sufism or Islamism, you can correct that, man. But I love you all. Love, truth, peace, freedom, justice, health, and wealth. Islamism is Sufism. Peace.